Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome. I'm so glad that you are here today for the workshop Rent Smart, Getting and Maintaining Housing. My name is Heather Smith. I am the Family Center Manager for Friends Association for the Care and Protection of Children. Whether you're just starting your housing journey, trying to stay stable, or looking for ways to avoid common pitfalls, you are in the right place. This isn't just about getting keys to a new unit. It's about knowing how to keep those keys, even when life throws challenges our way. Over the next hour, we're going to break down the keys to getting housing, what it really takes to stay housed long term, and how to work smarter with your case manager or other support staff, not harder. If housing has ever felt confusing, overwhelming, or just plain frustrating, take a breath. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be informed, prepared, and connected. And by the end of this session, you'll have tools that you can use right away. So let's get started. If you're watching live, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I will do my best to answer them as we go along. Getting housing. Getting housing is hard, and some of you may have been through that process already. You may be getting ready to go through that process. So how can you be best prepared? First and foremost is understanding what is affordable to you. Only you and your family can really figure out what is affordable for you to pay in rent. Income-based housing's general rule is 30% of your income should go towards housing. So when you are figuring out affordability and working on a budget, make sure that you are accounting for what your rental costs are, what your utility costs are, any discretionary live streaming, for instance, what your food costs are. If you receive SNAP, what are your food costs above SNAP? Make sure you are calculating all of those things into deciding what is affordable to you or not. Knowing what your credit score is can be really helpful as you get ready to look for housing, because landlords in recent years are really starting to look for a minimum credit score for renting to families. So if you have not done that, you can go to annualcreditreport.com and run that for free. Searching strategically within your budget. If you are someone who struggles with budgeting, reach out to organizations that help with that. Reach out to a case manager to really help you understand not just what your income is, not just what your expenses are, but also looking at what you need to do with each paycheck and what you need to put aside for each paycheck to help meet those rental costs. Searching strategically includes, where do I go? How do I find a rental unit? And sometimes that's word of mouth. Sometimes it is asking your current landlord if they have other units available, asking friends or family. But we also use web-based services. We can look on the internet and use rent.com, pahousingsearch.com, Trulia, Zillow, HotPads, Redfin. Those are all resources that can help you to locate housing in the areas that you want to live. I do want to give a word of caution here, though, because a lot of times on those websites, if you want to apply, you're paying an application fee. So it really becomes important for you to really understand what that landlord is going to look for, so that you're not wasting money on an application fee if, for instance, your credit score or your income is lower than what that landlord is going to require. Knowing what the potential landlord is going to look at. They're going to look at your income. They're going to look at your credit score. Most of them will run that. They're going to look at any current legal history. They're going to look at criminal background. They're going to look at your eviction history. Some landlords even want to talk to your previous landlord for a reference. The importance here is you knowing what your story is. So making sure that you know what your credit shows, making sure you know what your criminal background shows, making sure you know what your eviction history shows. Credit reports show what your credit score is, but it also looks at, do you have an on-time payment record? It shows what your debts currently are. The criminal background is going to show any pending legal charges. It's going to show what charges that you have had on your record. It's going to show what your plea was. It's going to show what the penalty was for whatever the charges were. What you want to do here when you're looking for housing is, if you have any of these issues, you want to get ahead of it immediately. You want to stay on top of it. You want to own it. You want to create a positive narrative for yourself when you are applying for work. So for instance, if you have issues on your credit, or if you have a criminal background, or if you have an eviction history, you're competing for housing sometimes for folks who don't have any of that. So the most powerful thing you can do is look at your history, own it, and talk to the landlord ahead of time about that. So let me give you an example. If you have a criminal background, you can go to the landlord up front and say, this is what I did. This is how it happened. This is what I'm doing to make sure that never happens again. If you have an eviction on your record, the same thing. Yes, I have an eviction. This is how it happened. This is what I'm doing to make sure that that never happens again. And if you can get ahead of that with the landlord, instead of waiting for them to run that background, sometimes that can go a long way for you. The other thing that I would like to say here is ensure your eviction record is correct. So if you've ever been taken for an eviction and there was a judgment for payment, and you actually were able to come up with the resources to make that payment, make sure that that judgment on your record is accurate and it shows that. And if it doesn't, you can go to that landlord and ask them to make sure that they update the court. The public record for your evictions is to go to ujsportal.pacourts.us, and you can search by your name and date of birth, and any information regarding criminal record and evictions throughout the counties in Pennsylvania will show for you. Again, it's really important to make sure that that's accurate. Okay, so let's go into reading and understanding leases. This becomes really important as you are getting housing and trying to make a determination on what housing you want to choose if you've seen more than one unit. Understand your lease. How many of you have ever gone to a lease signing and the landlord just flips through pages and says, initial here, initial here, initial here. You get to the final page, they say, sign here. And don't ever take the time to read it, and the landlord doesn't take the time to explain it. In that situation, I'm going to recommend you slow the landlord down. Make sure that you read the lease and that you understand what the lease says. You want to make sure that the rent they quoted you is the rent that is listed on the lease. You want to make sure that the deposit they quoted you is what's on the lease. And then you also want to understand what your responsibilities are as far as utilities, what your responsibilities are in terms of lawn care or snow removal, or what your responsibilities are for bug infestation. If you don't read your lease and know whose responsibility that is, and you have an issue and you find out that it's your responsibility, that can really put a lot of damage to the budget that you're working so hard to maintain. Ask questions before you sign the lease. Make sure you understand what your lease term is. Am I signing a lease for a year? Am I signing a lease that is month to month? Some landlords will also do a 2-year lease. Make sure you understand that. If you get to 1 year of your lease, you want to also make sure you understand, will it revert to month? Will it revert for another year? The importance of understanding that is, if you decide to move, you want to make sure if it goes to another full year, what the terms are and what notice you have to give and how you would go about doing that. That's why it becomes really important to understand what you're signing. And if the landlord is rushing you through that, you have the right to say, I need a minute to review it, and I would highly suggest that you do that. If you have trouble understanding leases, take a trusted friend or family member or a case manager or other support person with you to help you navigate asking questions of the landlord. So we know that getting housing is hard. Keeping it can be even harder. So being prepared is key, and being prepared takes time and it takes education. So we're going to talk a little bit right now about what housing stability is. So what is housing stability? You've put all of the work in to find a unit. You've put the work in to either save money to pay your deposit. How can you ensure a good rental experience, and how can you ensure having stability throughout your stay with this landlord? So housing stability means staying housed long term without frequent moves or risk of eviction. It means being housed today, housed tomorrow, and housed into the future. Indicators of housing stability are that you're paying your rent on time. It could mean that you feel that you and your family are in a safe environment. It means good tenant landlord relationship. It means your budget is on track. It means you're saving. The reason I add saving into that is it becomes really important for housing stability to make sure that you're preparing for any emergencies that come up. That could be if you have a vehicle and you need something to pay for something to pass inspection. It could mean unexpected childcare costs. It could mean unexpected rise in rent after a year. So staying on target with your budget and making sure that you're trying to also put savings away for that can lead to long-term housing stability. What I would like to say is that if you are a family and you have children, of course, there are absolutely unexpected expenses that come up, school trips or school activities, needs new sneakers or new clothes. Keeping on top of your budget while housed and saving for those can help you with a long-term stable situation in your housing if you're paying attention to making sure you're prepared. So top challenges to housing stability, let's look at those for a moment. So top challenges to stability could be financial instability, conflict with your landlord or conflict with neighbors. It could mean challenges with mental health or substance use issues. It could include lack of communication, lack of a support system, whether that's a formal support system or informal support system. A formal support system would be case managers. It might be a therapist. It could be school personnel. Informal supports would be friends, family, maybe a church community. So needing to build on formal and informal supports can also lead to effective housing stability. The other challenge we're going to talk about are lease violations. So lease violations pop up a lot and happen frequently if you don't understand what your lease says. And the landlord should put in there some guidelines for you as a rentor. That it could include your lease says you can't have pets, and you decided that you would like to have a cat and move that cat in without permission from the landlord. It could be that you have a guest for a long period of time. It could mean damages to the unit. So those could all be lease violations and could challenge your stability in housing. So let's take a look at some examples and the impact of those challenges and what possible solutions there could be. So let's start with financial instability. So an example of that would be that you lose your job and you can't afford rent for the upcoming month. The impact of that is that you risk late fees, you risk the landlord filing for eviction if you don't pay your rent on time, or it could mean that you made the decision to make sure you take care of your rent so your utilities are falling behind. Solutions to that are budgeting proactively. Prioritize your rent as the first bill to be paid because we are looking at how do you maintain housing long term. It can mean accessing emergency rental assistance. You can contact local housing agencies or contact 211 for resources in the area of your zip code. You could reach out to the faith-based community. If you have a local church, you can talk to someone at the local church about what resources that they may have. You all may be familiar with Act Now, which is located in Westchester. Reach out to your faith-based organizations. Communicate early. This is very critical. Inform your landlord before you miss the payment. So if you know that you're going to be late for November rent because of a cut in hours, loss of a job, talk to the landlord beforehand, prepare them, plan with them, come up with a plan that the landlord would agree to, even if it means, can you give me some leeway without charging me late fees while I try to get assistance from another organization? Use your case manager. If you are someone who has a case manager involved with you, ask them for help up immediately when you know that you're going to have an issue paying rent. Ask them for what programs that you can access or that they can help you access, or sit down and ask them to help you create a new budget based on your new circumstance. Another challenge to housing stability is conflict. And that could be conflict with neighbors. We can't choose our neighbors, right? So it could be conflict with neighbors. It could be conflict with your landlord. So an example of that would be one of your neighbors complains about noise, or you argue with your landlord because they are delaying fixing your sink that is leaking. The impact of that is worsening relationships with the landlord or worsening relationships with neighbors. And sometimes that can lead to lease non-renewal. It could also lead to eviction notices if it's an ongoing issue. So what are the solutions to that? Stay calm. Take a breath. Walk away from the situation with the neighbor if you need to, but it is treating your landlord and your neighbor relationships like professional relationships. Stay calm, stay professional, walk away from the situation so that it doesn't escalate if you need to do that. Where there are issues with the landlord, where you're arguing because things aren't being fixed, document everything. Keep records of your complaints to the landlord, keep records of conversations, keep records of maintenance requests. All of this becomes important if it gets to a point where there is damage being created in your unit because they haven't fixed the leaking sink, for instance. And as long as you have a paper trail of requests to get it fixed and the landlord isn't responding, then you would be able to take the next step to have that figured out. So it becomes really important to make sure you're documenting that. I'm going to add here, if you have a conversation with your landlord at your unit or out in the community, follow it up with a text or an email, making sure that you put into writing what your understanding of that conversation was. And then I also would like to add here, if at all possible, do not ever pay your rent in cash. If you must pay your rent in cash, make sure that you get a written receipt that is dated and signed by the landlord. Make sure you can read it. Make sure you can read the landlord's signature. Make sure it is dated. Ask your case manager to intervene. So if there's an ongoing issue with your landlord and you're struggling to figure that out, ask your case manager. And if you don't have case management, ask someone from your support team to get involved to help you troubleshoot issues with the landlord. That becomes a little more tricky if you're asking for intervention when it comes to difficulty with a neighbor. But in those cases, you could also reach out to your landlord to let them know what the difficulty is. The next challenge to housing stability could be mental health concerns or challenges, as well as substance use. So it can impact stability, surely. So an example of that could be that you struggle with depression, and as a result of that, you stop keeping up with your apartment. You're not keeping things clean and in order. You forget to pay your rent. So that could be an example. The impact of that, depending on what your lease says, could be a violation of lease terms, or neglect can trigger an eviction, or it can trigger health code violations. So you want to do everything you can to avoid that. Solution, simple solution, and it's a hard choice and it's a difficult choice and it's a personal choice, is to connect to behavioral health services. Reach out to a therapist if you have one. If you don't have one, reach out to a clinic to try to schedule that for yourself. Get the support that you need so that your housing doesn't become in jeopardy, but more importantly, so that you're getting the care that you need. Build a support team around you. So that could include case management. It could include a therapist. It could just include trusted friends, and whether it's coworkers, friends, whether it's family, again, whether it's a community group that you're involved with. Build a support system around yourself. Create routines with reminders. So if you are someone who experiences depression that makes it difficult to function at times, create a system of alarms on your phone or a chart to put on your refrigerator just to keep you on track until you get the support services in place that you need. And it becomes a visual to help you realize that if I can get to the point where I can do these things, I'm doing what I need to do to maintain housing stability. So the next challenge can be lack of communication or lack of a support system. So maybe you miss a key notice from the landlord, or you fail to renew paperwork for a housing voucher, for instance. Missed deadlines can cause loss of housing assistance. It could also cause lease termination if you're not following through with those. So the solutions. This seems really funny to say, but open and check your mail regularly. Open and check your mail regularly. I have had the experience often where deadlines are missed because I don't get my mail. And that's pretty common, especially in the age we are with technology, where things are done online all the time. But if there are organizations that use the mail for renewals, make sure you're opening it, checking it. And if you don't understand what you're looking at or what it says or what you need to do, reach out for help. Keep your important documents organized. You want to I use a housing folder. And so all the documents you would ever need for renewal of any resource, not just housing programs, SNAP benefits, Medicaid, all of those programs have renewals. Keep all of your important paperwork in a folder. That includes your ID, your family's ID, birth certificate, social security cards. Make sure that you have all of that at all times handy. Talk to your case manager when you get notices, especially if you are someone who really utilizes case management to help you stay on track. Make sure they're aware of it, especially if there's a deadline, so that that case manager can fit you into their schedule to make sure that that gets done. Set reminders for important dates. So lease renewals, make sure you understand. And I actually teach people to put a calendar on their refrigerator monthly, usually, to what important dates are coming up, whether it's bills, whether it's renewal, whether, I have to send a pay stub to agency A, B, and C. Keep yourself reminders of important dates. The other thing is, if you are in a housing program where there are recertifications and inspections, make sure you stay up on your mail and your emails and any correspondence from those organizations. So the final challenge to housing stability that we're going to talk about is lease violations. And we talked earlier that could include guests, pets, damages. So let's give an example. You let a friend stay with you for more than the time that the lease allows. And a lot of times landlords will say, yeah, you can have a visitor for a couple weeks. But if I see this person here more than a couple of weeks, I'm going to assume that that person's living here. Or you bring a pet without notifying the landlord and making arrangements for that pet. So that is a violation of your lease if the lease states that. If the lease says you can have pets, I still recommend notifying the landlord. But if you're that's the importance of looking at your lease. What am I allowed to do and what am I not allowed to do? That can result, violating your lease terms can result in that landlord filing for eviction, just the same as if it was a non-payment of rent situation. So the solution to that is knowing your lease terms, especially regarding what it says about pets and guests, noise. Some landlords put in their information about noise. Some of them put in their information about smoking. So if you're a smoker, make sure you look at your lease to see if you're allowed to smoke in the unit or not. And cleanliness, especially if there's common areas. Ask before acting, right? I am sure that there are some of you, I want a puppy, I want a dog for my kids. And it's hard to tell them no. Just make sure the landlord is aware and that they allow it. Some landlords require information about your pet so that they have it on file. Report accidental damage immediately. So if something happens, my experience has been that people like to hide that because they don't want to get in trouble, but the landlord is going to want to know about that damage before it gets worse so that they can put into place what needs to get fixed. And again, I'm going to say use your case manager. And I am aware that some of you who are listening may not have a case manager. And that's why I'm also going to say, like, reach out to someone that you know, that you trust, that can help you work through some of these things. Use someone to help you advocate if you feel like you're being treated unfairly and you don't feel comfortable advocating for yourself. And just a reminder, housing stability doesn't mean being perfect. It means being prepared, being communicative, and being connected. Okay. So we've reviewed the challenges to housing stability. Now let's talk about practices for maintaining that housing that you've worked so hard to get. Be a proactive tenant. Communicate early if issues arise. Know your rights and responsibilities. And one of the most important things that you can do is know and understand, educate yourself on not only what your rights are as a tenant, but what your responsibilities are as a tenant. And also include there understanding what the rights and responsibilities of your landlord are. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. So one of your responsibilities as a tenant is to pay rent on time. It's keeping the unit clean and undamaged, following the terms of your lease, all things that we've talked about already tonight. Following proper notice before moving out. Don't decide I'm moving out and I'm not going to tell the landlord because that you could end up paying a lot of money if you don't do that properly with what your lease terms say. Your rights include you have a right to a safe and habitable living space. So the landlord has a right to fix things when they're broken and take care of them for you. You have a right to privacy and proper notice before your landlord enters. You have protections against discrimination, and you have a right to proper eviction procedures. Okay, so you have rights and you have responsibilities. Your landlord has the right to collect their rent. It is a business for them, so they have a right to collect their rent. They also must follow their own lease for collecting rent. They can't increase your rent mid-lease term unless they put in that lease that they have the right to do that. So again, if you take away anything from tonight, read your lease and make sure you understand. Some landlords will sneak some stuff in there, and that could be one of them. They have a responsibility for maintenance and repairs. And keeping up with building codes. And if you're in a situation where you're struggling to get things repaired, there are proper ways that you can go about documenting, putting your rent in escrow. That is not something we're going to review tonight, but it is something that if you're having that issue, educate yourself on how to properly put rent into escrow. Okay. We talked about already documenting everything, keeping copies of rent receipts, maintenance requests, and your communication. Use email or text when possible. Avoid verbal communication with your landlord, especially if you're reporting an ongoing issue. And if you must have a verbal conversation, follow it up in writing with what you talked about. Budget monthly for your rent. Build habits like setting aside rent first. Take the number of paychecks you receive per month. Look at what your rent is. Divide the number of paychecks so that you know what amount you need to put aside with each paycheck. So let me give you a simple example. If your rent is $1,000 and you get paid twice per month, you have to set aside from each paycheck $500 to make sure that you're meeting rent for the following month. Once you've done that, you want to take a look at when are my other bills due and how much from each paycheck needs to be set aside to make sure you're paying those bills before your next paycheck is due. If you're someone who struggles with budgeting, there are resources out there that can help you really get a handle on how to best manage your budget. And looking into rental assistance if you need it before it becomes a crisis. Asking for help early. Don't wait until you're in trouble to help or to involve your support systems. If you know you're going to be in trouble, involve your support systems early. What would you do if you lost your income for a month? Just take a moment to think about that. Like, what would you do if you lost your income for a month? Take a look about some of the things that we've talked about tonight and create a plan. Like, no one wants to lose their income and have difficulty paying rent, but have a plan. Know who you would call and how to go about contacting agencies that might be able to help you. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about case management and how to utilize your case manager to your advantage, to learn how to educate yourself, to learn how to advocate, and use them as someone who is a partner with you, not a fixer, not a judge, not a boss. They work with you to help you stay housed and continue to move forward towards self-sufficiency and long-term housing stability. So how do you make your case manager work for you? You want to make sure that you understand that case managers are a resource. They're not just someone who's checking in with you. Use them as a resource. You are the expert in your own life. You know what you need. You know what your family needs. Bringing a case manager or a trusted other provider into your support circle can help you define what you need to maintain stability. But let's talk a little bit about what case managers can do and what case managers can't do. Okay. They can help you apply for benefits and housing. They can explain your housing paperwork and help you to understand your lease terms. They can connect you to rent, food, and health resources. They can advocate for you with landlords or other provider agencies where you're either trying to get services for yourself or your children. They can help advocate in that situation. They can help you create a housing stability plan. What does it mean for you and your family to have stability? What services do you need? What assistance do you need? Maybe you need just a little bit of budgeting help. Have them work with you to create a plan. They can also help mediate conflicts, whether that's with your landlord, maybe a neighbor. That becomes a little tricky when you want to have someone advocate for you with neighbors or intervene or mediate, but that is something that they can talk you through and work with you on. So what can't case managers do? Case managers cannot break the lease rules for you. They can't guarantee you housing. They can't force a landlord to take you. Although I will tell you, we try really hard. We advocate fiercely when we're trying to house a family. Knowing your story, knowing your history, and being able to confidently talk to landlords about what you've done to overcome those issues becomes something that your case manager can help you learn, help role play with you, help you feel more confident. They can't do everything for you. Case management absolutely needs you to participate in your housing stability. Case managers can't read your mind, although there are times we all wish that people could read our minds. You have to speak up. If you are someone that struggles to speak up and it's easier for you to write things down and articulate what your needs are, start there. Just get it out somehow so that case management knows what you are facing and what you need assistance with. Case managers can't replace your voice, but they can help you amplify it. And again, I say here, you're the expert in your own life. You know what you need. You know what works best for you. Help by speaking up and speaking with case managers. They can help amplify your voice and help you advocate for yourself, help teach you how to advocate for yourself. So they can connect you to resources, mediate with landlords, advocate for you, help with paperwork, and develop stability plans. They can't break the rules. They can't help you break the rules. They can't pay your rent directly unless you're in a program that supports that. And they can't act really without your participation. So how do you build a partnership with your case manager or other support person? Be honest and be proactive. I often tell people there's no judgment here. Our goal as case management staff is to work with what your needs are, what your barriers are, and help you build a system around yourself to overcome them. So there's no judgment. Share your goals. So if you're in a situation where you're working with an organization and we do goal planning, make sure that that goal plan speaks to what your goals are. Oftentimes, as providers, we want to talk about, oh, you need to get a job, you need to do your budget, you need to get your GED. What do you want? So those could be things that you want, applying for benefits. Those could be goals that you have. But do you have goals outside of that that we can include in your housing stability plan? That may be, I want to get my GED. I would like to get my CNA. I would like to get my driver's license and my CDL. Make sure that you're utilizing case management to include those types of goals in your situation, especially if they're goals that are going to help you maintain your housing. Keep appointments, respond to outreach efforts with your case manager, and asking for what you need. For example, can you help me talk to my landlord? If you're struggling with your landlord, if you feel uncomfortable with your landlord, if you feel uncomfortable talking about whatever the issue is with your landlord, can you help me talk to them? Sometimes it is joining you in that conversation. Sometimes it could be role playing with you in that situation to help build your confidence. Is there rent help available this month? If you're in a situation where you've lost a job or you lost hours, being upfront with your case manager even can help prevent this situation becoming more of a crisis. I need help making a plan if I lose my job, or I need help creating an emergency plan around A, B, or C. I'll give an example of, mental health. If you have mental health challenges and you're concerned about the level of your mental health, could need inpatient services, for example, asking your case manager to help plan around, okay, what happens if I need to go to the hospital? Help me to make a plan for what that looks like for my job, what that looks like for paying bills, what that looks like for care for my children. Utilize case management to help you build those plans, especially if it gives you a sense of peace and stability. Keep records of support. Even with case management, if you have an hour-long meeting with a case manager and you're struggling to remember what you talked about, ask them to send you a follow-up email with the points of what you talked about for that appointment and what they asked you to follow up on. Then you can respond as well with, okay, I completed A and B, but I really need your help on item number C. Knowing when to escalate if you're not getting help. So if you feel like you're not getting help from a provider, from another professional, from a case manager, knowing when you've exhausted everything you can to get that person to meet you where you are, and then escalating it maybe to that person's supervisor. So it isn't necessarily, oh, my case manager missed one appointment for me, so I'm going to call their supervisor. What I mean is, if you're struggling with engaging with the case manager or other support person, and you're having difficulty managing conflict with them, or you're having difficulty communicating with them, that knowing at what point can I talk directly to that person and express my concerns, and if I'm not getting anywhere with that, then elevating it to the next level. The bottom line for you is you're trying to do everything you can to maintain housing and stability for your family. And if you're not getting assistance in an area where you think you need assistance, it is your right to escalate that. I would just work on communication skills with those providers to make sure that you're also learning and educating yourself on how can I best advocate for myself in those situations. So we're going to talk about how to be your own advocate. It's a hard skill, and it can become really powerful if you build confidence in doing that. So self-advocacy helps you take ownership of your housing journey. It helps you to build confidence in navigating the systems around you that can often feel overwhelming. So it's knowing your rights, especially around leases, evictions, and discrimination. It's being prepared, bringing your documents, your notes, or questions that you have to meetings you have with case management. It's using your voice. Clearly explain what you need, why you need it, and when you need it by. And the reason I say, and when you need it by, so if you're working with case management, chances are they're working with multiple families. So if you can communicate directly, this is what I need done, this is why I need it. And by the way, I'm sorry that I'm giving you short notice, but I need it by tomorrow. Okay. Or use a calendar on your refrigerator to plan out when you know things are due so that you can help incorporate your case manager's schedule into those things that you need. Use your voice. Oh, I just said that. Sorry. Clearly explaining what you need and why. Following up after meetings, follow up in writing when possible. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case manager following up with you. If you have a meeting with a provider or with a case manager, you have the right to send a follow-up email that says, hey, our meeting today, this is what I took away from it. This is what I understand that you need me to do. This is what I feel like I'm going to need help with. And I'm going to say, be respectful, but be firm, because again, you are working on your own stability and maintaining housing long-term. You better than anybody know what your needs are. You can advocate for yourself without being disrespectful or aggressive. And we talked earlier about arguments with neighbors and landlords. Sometimes it is just taking a breath and walking away, let the situation die down, do things in writing if that's easier because of the level of conflict. So let's talk about a couple of examples. Your landlord won't fix that leaking sink that we have been talking about tonight. You can simply say, hey, I've submitted a maintenance request and it's been 10 days. Can I please speak to someone about next steps. So either that landlord's going to get back to you or he's going to put you in touch with a property manager, but you're putting that in writing so that you keep a trail of communication. Your case manager, for example, isn't returning your calls. Hi, I've left 2 messages over the past week. I really need support with a housing issue. What's the best way to reach you or your supervisor, especially if you feel like it is an urgent matter and you need it, especially around housing? Because we talked earlier about being proactive and making sure that you're informing and seeking assistance before it becomes a crisis. Maybe you're denied housing due to an old eviction. I understand your concern. I've completed a rental education program and I've had a stable rental history since then. Can we discuss it further? This goes to what we were saying earlier about owning your story and being upfront with, hey, this is on my record. This is what I've done to take care of it. This is why it happened. I'm not saying you need to put all of your personal information out there. Your information is your information, but being upfront with how it's going, and that can go a long way. Okay. Again, I'm going to say, check if you feel like you don't have evictions on your record, go on to the public portal and look to see what it says and make sure it's accurate, because there is a way that you can get that fixed. Okay. So to summarize everything that we've been talking about, okay, key practice: review your lease in full before signing. The reason we do that is because it prevents misunderstandings that can lead to eviction. We want to report issues early and respectfully. That builds landlord trust. It allows for early solutions before it becomes a crisis. Pay rent first and budget for emergencies. That can reduce eviction risk. I can't stress enough how important understanding how to budget is. It is really difficult to maintain housing stability and feel that stability. You're working hard. I know you're working hard. It becomes difficult if you're not taking each paycheck and putting money aside from each paycheck. So really working to learn how to budget, find a system that works really well for you. If you struggle there, ask for help. Use your case manager before it becomes a crisis. That keeps your options open because it gives more time to plan, but it also hopefully keeps your stress a little lower when that's happening. Keep a housing folder with all of your important documents, especially, and I'm talking about documents like all the documents we all need for life: birth certificate, social security card, ID. But I'm also talking about keeping a folder if you are having a dispute with your landlord, keeping all of that documentation. If you're someone who emails easily, I would highly recommend printing those emails, especially if it's a considerable issue with the landlord that you feel you would have to take to the next level. Okay. Know your rights, empower yourself, know what your rights are as a tenant, know what your responsibilities are as a tenant, know what your rights are around eviction. That's a lot of information that we went over. And that also brings us to the end of today's Rent Smart workshop. Thanks for sticking with me, especially through all of that information. We've covered a lot, from finding a place that you can afford, to reading your lease, to navigating challenges like financial setbacks, conflicts, or just keeping up with paperwork. Here's what I want you to walk away with from tonight's workshop. Getting housing is the first step. Keeping it takes planning, it takes communication, and it takes knowing where to turn before a small issue becomes a big problem. Your case manager is a partner, and I'm using case manager. Interchange that if you don't have case management with a trusted person in your life, whether it's a provider, a friend, a clergy person. Use them as a partner. Not as they're Kate, staff are not there to judge you. They're not your boss. It's a partnership. You don't have to face housing challenges alone. And most importantly, you are your best advocate. Again, you're the expert in your life. Providers aren't the expert in your life. You are the expert in your life. You don't have to know all the answers, but you do have the power to ask questions. You have the power to speak up, and you have the power to take action. If you only remember one thing today, let it be this: housing stability does not require perfection. It requires preparation. It requires communication. It requires support. All of us need support at one time or another. Keep your documents organized. Reach out early if something feels off. Know your rights, and don't be afraid to use your voice. Take care of yourselves. We do have a few minutes if anyone wanted to throw a question in the chat. You're not alone on this journey. And this is the second workshop I've done for the Single Mothers Conference. And if I get the opportunity again, we go into a lot of detail on how to be a good tenant and how to present yourself to landlords. So stay tuned if that's something that's going to happen. I would love to see you all there. But if there are no questions, thank you for joining me this evening. You're not alone. Use your support network and keep up the good work. Thank you all and have a good evening.